Mr. Speaker, and I just want to start off by asking a question, Mr. Speaker. 14 years, the honourable member from Windsor West has been in this House, and we still can't figure out how to modulate his volume when he's giving his speech. He's very loud but very passionate. Mr. Speaker, Canada, or Madam Speaker, Canada is a trading nation, and from our earliest days, we have focused on trade, whether it was our Indigenous people trading with some of the earliest explorers, fur and fish, to the forming of the Company of Adventures of England trading, which we now know as the Hudson Bay Company. Canada has always been a trading nation. And today I want to talk a little bit about my riding, the Asia-Pacific region, and how this agreement will be core to Canada's growth. Madam Speaker, as I mentioned, Canada is a trading nation, and the rapid economic growth of the Asia-Pacific countries is and has been reshaping our global trade flows for quite some time. The Asia-Pacific region is expected to represent 2/3 of the world's middle class by 2030 and 1/2 of the global GDP by 2050. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement ensures that Canada would be the only G7 nation with free trade access to all of the U.S. and America's, Europe, and Asia-Pacific continents, granting access to over 60% of the world's economy, a market of over 800 million consumers, Madam Speaker, with a GDP of over 29 trillion. Add that to our already market of 500 million consumers. But the TPP agreement does so much more than that, Madam Speaker. It'll protect and create jobs, economic opportunities, and financial security for workers and businesses in all regions of Canada. And Madam Speaker, I find it humorous that our colleagues from the NDP continue to stand up and talk about that they're fighting for the jobs, and those very jobs that they're trying to fight for are predicated on having business and trade, Madam Speaker. And we all have phones and cell phones, and they're so against trade, but that cell phone that they've got, Madam Speaker, is here because of trade. That computer they have is here because of trade. Madam Speaker, in my very first speech in this House, I stood up and I spoke about my riding at Caribou Prince George and how, adjacent to our honourable colleague from Skeena-Balclay, our combined region, we have the Port of Prince Rupert, the closest and fastest marine port to Asia, which allows competitive advantage that our goods can travel 1 to 2 days faster to Asia than any other West Coast port. It means, again, that we have that competitive advantage. Canada has a competitive advantage in trade. We also have the fastest and greenest road and rail networks into the U.S. Midwest markets, running right straight through my region, Madam Speaker. And my very own airport, the one that I'm so proud to say that I was part of building and marketing our region for so long, we have one of the largest runways in Canada, Madam Speaker. And by air, it's equidistant to Europe and Asia. We can compete on the global trade market. We can compete on the global transportation market, Madam Speaker. Just a few of Canada's competitive trade advantages in and near my riding. However, Madam Speaker, I come from the beautiful province of British Columbia, and we have one of Canada's largest ports, the Port Metro Vancouver. And it is North America's most diversified port. It trades up to $75 billion in goods with more than 160 trading partners, Madam Speaker. Substantial. BC's economy is leading our nation. Why? Yeah. Why? Because we are taking advantage of the competitive advantages that we have, and because of the Conservative government previously opening the doors for trade and allowing investment in our ports, investment in our airports, investment in our transportation routes. This government, narrow-minded, not thinking through. Madam Speaker, they are putting us further and further behind. We've said this before, we need to lead, not lag, because if we do that, we're going to fall further behind. We are falling further behind already in this past 6 months. Madam Speaker, I raise all these points because our nation is dependent on resource development. Our economy is predicated on trading the commodities we produce, something we have failed to see any importance placed on from this government. As a mid-sized economy, Mr. Speaker, Canada is better when, Madam Speaker, when we have multilateral rules to protect its economic interests so that we diversify the markets that we're dependent upon, so that we're not, Madam Speaker, putting all of our eggs in one basket. More importantly, Madam Speaker, trade represents an opportunity for us to grow our economy without spending billions of dollars we don't have. Oops. I think they've already done that, Madam Speaker. Continue to spend billions of dollars with no plan to get us out of deficit, to find a way for us to grow our economy. We have two significant agreements that are on the table today, whether it's our softwood lumber agreement or the TPP, which this government continues to vacillate on and take their time. And as they do that, Madam Speaker, we continue to lag further and further behind. Madam Speaker, Canada is a nation built on exports. I've mentioned that before. We are indeed a trading nation. I think we can all agree that. We need free trade, Madam Speaker. We need to access markets around the world. Given the opportunity, Canadian producers can thrive. It was our Conservative government that recognized this opportunity. The former government met with farmers, manufacturers, the auto industry. Just to name a few, Madam Speaker. All that to say, the work that was put in prior to this Liberal government coming in set them up very well. They're taking credit for cool, Madam Speaker. But it was the work of this Conservative government and our former trade minister that set them up to be able to take advantage of that. Set them up good. Madam Speaker, looked out for Canada's interests. Set Canada up for the future. Madam Speaker, if I can just use a hockey term for a second, I mentioned it before, I am a die-hard hockey fan, and sadly there are no Canadian teams in the playoffs, but we see a government here that for 6 months has taken every opportunity to rag the puck on one of the most important trade agreements in modern history, Madam Speaker. The Minister of International Trade and Foreign Affairs have both publicly stated that the Liberal Party is pro-free trade. Fly that banner. Yet, all of the travel across the border that they've done, the state dinners and what they've done, they have yet to come back with one signed agreement. One signed agreement.
Nothing. Just nothing.
The last time the Liberals were in power, they neglected this crucial file. Since 2006, the previous Conservative government signed free trade agreements with 46 countries, Madam Speaker, compared to the 5 from the previous Liberal government. For the record, I'll repeat this once more, just in case our friends across the way aren't listening. 46 to 5. Almost sounds like a Canada versus Belarus hockey game, Madam Speaker. Under our Conservative government, Madam Speaker, Canada became a global leader on the trade liberalization and in the fight against protectionism. Ratifying the Trans-Pacific Partnership at this time gives the Liberals the opportunity to prove they really are serious about the file, Madam Speaker, that they really are serious about trade in this country, Madam Speaker, that they really are serious about growing Canada, Madam Speaker, about protecting high-quality, well-paying jobs, looking out for Canadians who work in the industries that are the backbone of this country. 1 in 5 jobs, Madam Speaker, 1 in 5 jobs are tied to trade. Canada needs to lead, Madam Speaker, not lag. And Madam Speaker, I know my time is short, but let me get one thing very clear. Throughout the TPP negotiations, the Conservative government kept Canadians informed. We consulted extensively to assure the agreement would meet the needs of Canadians, and we received valuable input, and we adjusted. We took the information they gave us into consideration, and we adjusted our stance. I want to bring up a few names that were in support, just a few. the Vancouver Board of Trade, the Mining Association BC, the Council of Forest Industries, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Cattlemen's Association, the Agri-Food Trade Alliance, Madam Speaker, the Agri-Food Trade Alliance that stood and said this is a historic moment for Canadians and the Canadian families that are dependent on the agri-food industry. But this government would not understand that, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Yes, Madam Speaker, at times the Conservatives like to exaggerate. You know, I find it interesting when they say, you know, we signed 30-plus trade agreements. What they don't necessarily say is that one of those trade agreements, which wasn't technically signed, was the EU, which was 28 countries, Madam Speaker. One agreement, 28 countries. The good news is that it's this government that is actually following through on, yes, a lot of the work that was done by the Conservatives, but it's going to depend on this government following through to ensure that we get that particular agreement signed off. My question to the member is, why does the Conservatives tend to oppose working and having due diligence on important trade agreements? What's wrong with having some patience and allowing Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Cariboo, Prince George.
Speaker, I find it humorous coming across the way the question coming across the way from a government that has campaigned on open and transparent ways, and you know what? They're going to change the way the Canadian government has been seen, and all they've done is put Canada back in the dark ages. And you know, you talked about the EU agreement, 28 countries. I'm not quite sure how this, the honourable member from across the way can point fingers when under their former government, five agreements to 46, Madam Speaker, 5 to 46. Thank you.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the commentary from the member for Prince George Cariboo. And I know that he took issue with the fact that I think he stated something along the lines, after 14 years I would have to learn, or would have learned how to moderate my volume, Madam Speaker. And I find that particular issue particularly of concern. And
Member that to allow the question to be posed so that he can have an opportunity to answer. Be respectful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think that it's important to note, though, the effects of this trade agreement coming from a constituency of mine. And I have no problem of bringing passion to this House and described in any way. I don't mind, because the auto industry for us has meant everything. It created the RAND formula in Canada that actually creates a meaningful opportunity for social justice, gender equality, a number of different initiatives and money to the United Way. Most recently, our Unifor Local 444 donated $250,000 to the Fort McMurray disaster that's taking place right now. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, I have no difficulty whatsoever wearing that pride on my sleeve, because I know the men and women have worked every single day for a century to contribute back to this country, and their future and their children's future are at risk. And I don't make no apologies at it whatsoever.
The Honourable Member for Cariboo, Prince George.
Madam Speaker, there was no question there, but and I want to stand and say that I will apologize to the honourable colleague. I was not pointing fingers at him. I was merely saying that in 14 years we haven't been able to modulate our volume when he gets up because of his passion, and I commend him for his passion. So I hope through you, Madam Speaker, that he accepts my apology. I appreciate the passion for him and his riding. Madam Speaker, you know, again, as we talked about earlier on through my speech, Canada is predicated on trade. So the very people that our honourable colleague from Windsor West is talking about, this agreement protects jobs, gives them jobs, high-paying jobs, Madam Speaker, whether it's our agri-food sector, our auto sector, and our manufacturing sector. TPP is good for Canadians, and there are measures in place. I hope that this government does their due diligence and allows us to sign off on this and continue to lead Canada to continue to lead the global industry. Thank you.